I used to think that by the time I hit 70, life would start slowing down, that the days would become quieter, simpler, maybe even smaller. But now, standing here at 72, I realized something nobody ever told me. You're still growing even after 70. It's not just about surviving, it's about discovering, about healing old wounds, learning new truths, and finding a version of yourself that was buried under decades of noise. I've met people in their late 70s who picked up painting for the first time. I've listened to an 81-year-old in Oregon who finally forgave his brother after 50 years of silence, and a woman in her 90s in Ireland who said, with the softest voice, that she had only just learned how to love herself. Growth doesn't retire. It doesn't depend on your age or how many candles are on your cake. It depends on your willingness to stay open, to reflect, to believe that there is still more of you waiting to be found. That's what this space is for. Elderly Reflections, a place for elderly wisdom, senior health, quiet motivation, and the kind of life lessons you only understand once you've lived enough to let go. So if you're still curious, still evolving, or just looking for stories that feel like home, subscribe, stick around, and let's keep growing together. You know, people think growth is something that belongs to the young, that by the time you're 70, you're done changing, done learning. But I've found it's just not true. If anything, life starts to strip away the noise, and what's left is this raw, honest space where real growth can finally happen. I want to share with you 4 ways we continue to grow even after 70. Not in theory. I'm talking about the kind of growth I've seen with my own eyes, in real people with real lives. And maybe, just maybe, in you too. First, we grow emotionally. That means we start to understand ourselves in ways we couldn't when we were younger, because we were too busy, too proud, or too afraid. Emotional growth is about forgiveness, closure, and letting go of the things that once weighed us down. I sat on a bench last fall beside Daniel, a retired mechanic from Manchester, 78 years old. We were watching the leaves fall in silence when he suddenly said, "I haven't spoken to my son in 11 years. And the truth is, I stopped remembering why we stopped talking. I just kept choosing silence." He looked down, then added, "But I called him last month. I said I was tired of carrying something that wasn't mine anymore." We cried. He said, "I've been waiting for that call, Dad." That right there is what I mean. Emotional growth doesn't come from books. It comes from the courage to soften, to reach out, even when it hurts. Second, we grow intellectually. Our brains don't just shut down because we retire. In fact, science tells us that continued learning, new skills, new languages, even puzzles, can slow cognitive decline and increase joy. But beyond science, there's something deeply human about learning at this stage in life. Susan, 74 from Portland, told me, "I lost my husband, and for months I didn't know who I was without him. But then I started taking online classes. First French, then creative writing. I thought I was just filling time, but I was actually rediscovering myself." She showed me a poem she wrote folded in her purse. It was about rain and healing and the quiet strength of women who learn to live again. Learning gave her back her voice, and I believe that's something we all still have waiting inside us. Third, we grow socially. And I know that sounds strange, because many people our age feel more isolated than ever. But the truth is, real connection doesn't mean having lots of people around. It means being real with the few who truly matter. Clara is 80 and runs a small book club in Montreal. She told me at this age I've stopped wasting time on small talk. If it doesn't feed my soul, I let it go. She said her group used to be large, but now it's just 5 women who meet every other week, drink tea, read poetry, and talk about life, not the weather. She smiled and said, "These women know things about me I never shared with my own family." That's not less connection, that's more. And finally, we grow spiritually. And I don't just mean religion. I mean that quiet, internal shift where we stop asking what we're supposed to do and start asking who we really are. Jim is 90, a Y veteran living in upstate New York. We were sitting on his porch one evening, and he said, "You know what strength is? It's not holding everything in. It's finally being okay with letting it out." He told me about his brother, who passed last year. They hadn't spoken in decades. But in the last week of his brother's life, Jim wrote him a letter, filled with the kind of love they never said out loud as boys. "I didn't get a response," he said, "but I didn't need one. I just needed to know I had spoken my truth." That's spiritual growth, the kind that makes peace with the past and gives grace to the present. So when people say life stops after 70, I smile to myself, because I've seen more transformation in these so-called final chapters than I ever saw in the early ones. We just learn to grow differently, quieter, deeper, truer. And that kind of growth, my friend, is what makes these years not an ending, but a masterpiece in progress. Let's talk about what this kind of growth really looks like, day by day. Because it's easy to talk about transformation in big words, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. But the truth is, it doesn't happen with fireworks. It happens in small, almost invisible moments. I've seen it over and over in seniors who never expected to change and then woke up one morning different. Sometimes it begins with sometimes with a choice, but most of the time it starts with something simple. A shift in how we look at our lives. I remember Helen, 77, from Wisconsin. She spent most of her life as a homemaker, a mother of 4, and a caregiver to her husband, who had Alzheimer's for the last 11 years. But a few months after his funeral, she found herself walking into the local library and signing up for a watercolor class. "I just needed to hold something that didn't ask anything of me," she said. 2 years later, she sold 3 of her paintings. One hangs in the community center, and when people ask her if she's an artist, she smiles and says, "I think I am now." That's everyday growth. A woman reclaims her name, her space, and her story, one brushstroke at a time. And it's not always about something new. Sometimes it's about returning to something old with new eyes. There's Robert, 81, a former music teacher in Dublin. He told me about how he stopped playing piano for nearly a decade after his wife died. "It just didn't feel the same without her humming in the kitchen," he said. But last winter, on a particularly gray morning, he sat down and started playing again. Not for performance, not for anyone, just to feel something. "It was like I was speaking to her again," he said. "Like I had permission to feel joy again." He plays every day now. Sometimes it's Bach, sometimes it's just improvising, but he said it helped him reconnect not only with his grief, but with life. And you know what's interesting? A lot of seniors I meet talk about time differently. It's no longer about filling the day, it's about savoring it. Take Maria, 85, in Barcelona. Every morning she walks to the same cafe, orders a small espresso, and writes 3 things she's grateful for in a little blue notebook. When I asked her why she does it, she said, "Because when you're 85, you realize every day is extra. And I don't want to waste the extras." She showed me a page that said, "Sunlight on my feet, my granddaughter's phone call, the smell of clean laundry." That's what spiritual growth looks like. It's quiet, but it changes everything. Now, not every story is sweet. Growth doesn't mean things stop hurting, but it means we respond differently. That's what happened with Marcus, 79, a retired fireman in New Jersey. He had been struggling with loneliness since his wife passed 3 years ago. He said, "I didn't realize how much of me was built around being part of a we." For a while, he didn't leave the house much. But one Sunday, his neighbor asked if he could help fix a broken fence. Marcus didn't think twice, just grabbed his old toolbox and went over. "Something about the hammer in my hand reminded me of who I used to be," he told me. That afternoon, they fixed the fence, drank lemonade, and made plans to do it again. Not just the fence, other things. "I realized I still had something to offer," Marcus said. That's social growth, not just connecting, but rediscovering our usefulness. Sometimes growth comes in unexpected forms, like slowing down, saying no, recognizing your limits without guilt. That's what Eleanor, 82, in Glasgow told me. She used to try to keep up with everyone, grandkids, church groups, charity events. But last year, after a minor stroke, her doctor told her to rest more. She resisted at first. "I felt like if I slowed down, I'd disappear," she said. But eventually she started finding joy in saying no, in doing less, but with more presence. "I finally had time to notice the world again. I saw a robin make a nest on my window, watched the clouds move like slow dancers. It was like life came into focus. Slowing down isn't failure, it's wisdom in motion." And here's another truth nobody says enough. We grow in how we handle regret. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop rewriting the past and start rewriting the story you tell about it. Walter, 87, in Canada, said it best. "I spent years wishing I'd been a better father. I missed so much while chasing a career. But I told my grandson the truth. I told him what I wish I'd done differently. And you know what he said? That's why I'm trying to do it better with my dad, Grandpa." Maybe that's my redemption. That's not just growth, that's legacy. And legacy, my friend, is the last chapter we get to write with the time we still have. So yes, these things, gratitude, creativity, reconnection, honesty, purpose, they don't just belong to the young. They belong to anyone who's willing to stay awake to their life, no matter how late in the story they realize they're still the author. And if that's not growth, I don't know what is. What do you actually do with all this? How do you take emotional healing, intellectual curiosity, spiritual clarity, and social connection, and turn them into something real, something that makes you feel alive at 70, 75, 80, and beyond? I've had the privilege of listening to hundreds of older folks from all walks of life, and I'll tell you this, growth isn't just something that happens to them, it's something they choose. It starts with small habits, daily rituals that open the door for change. Take Harold, 76, from Boston. He told me I started writing 1 page a day. Doesn't matter if it's good, just thoughts, memories, what I saw out the window. And the funny thing is, it's changed the way I see myself. I've stopped thinking about who I used to be. I'm more interested in who I'm becoming. Writing helped Harold process the past and imagine a different future. Not one filled with regrets, but with clarity. And that's the power of reflection. Others find growth through service, giving back not because they have to, but because they want to matter. Agnes, 83, volunteers twice a week at a hospital in Toronto, simply holding hands with patients who are alone. She told me, I can't walk fast and I forget names, but I can sit. I can listen, and sometimes that's what people need most. Her presence is her gift, and it keeps her grounded. I'm not here to be remembered, she said. I'm here to remind someone else that they still matter. And then there are folks like Ben, 79, in Colorado, who've discovered growth through movement, gentle exercise, daily walks, a little stretching every morning. He laughed and said, I've become the old man I used to make fun of, the one doing Tai Chi in the park. But I'll tell you what, I feel better now than I did at 60. It's not about being young again. It's about respecting the body that carried me this far. Ben's not chasing youth. He's honoring his age. And that shift, that's what keeps the spirit sharp. Some find growth through letting go. That's not always easy, especially when you've carried stories, pain, or roles for decades. But letting go is sometimes the bravest thing an older adult can do. Margaret, 85, told me she finally stopped pretending to enjoy Bridge Club. I went for years because it was expected. Then one day I asked myself, why? I'd rather sit in my garden with a book. She quit and nothing fell apart. In fact, she said she's felt more like herself in the last 6 months than she did in the last 20 years. She grew by adding but by subtracting. That's wisdom. Others pursue new things. Not wild adventures, not world tours, but new within reach. Like learning to cook something they've never made before. Starting a garden, reading about topics they never studied in school. Eleanor, who's 90 and lives alone in rural England, told me she started watching astronomy videos online. I'll never go to space, she said, but I like remembering how small I am. It helps me worry less. That right there, that's growth. And finally, the biggest thing I've noticed is that people who keep growing after 70, after 80, they don't avoid the truth. They make peace with it. They're not afraid to say, yes, I'm getting older. Yes, some things hurt. Yes, some days are lonely. But they don't stop there. They also say, yes, I'm still here. Yes, I still have love to give. Yes, I still matter. And that changes everything. So if you're listening to this and thinking, it's too late for me, I want to gently say, you're wrong. You're still growing. Maybe it doesn't look like it used to. Maybe it's quieter. But it's happening. Every time you tell the truth. Every time you forgive yourself. Every time you say, I don't know, but I'm willing to try. After all the stories, the lessons, the quiet changes, you might be asking yourself, what now? Well, I'll tell you what now. Now you keep going, you keep growing, you keep listening to that small voice inside that says, I'm still becoming, because you are. Every sunrise is another page, every conversation a little step forward, and no matter your age, you're still allowed to change your mind, to find something new, to rest, to rise, to love, to forgive. And if no one's told you this lately, let me be the one. You matter. Your life still matters. Not just to your children or your neighbors, to the world, to the shape of what it means to live fully after 70. Thank you for spending your time here with me on Elderly Reflections. I'd be honored if you'd share this with someone who might need to hear it. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel so we can keep growing, learning, and living together. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know. Until next time, take care and keep reflecting.